Chapter 13. Clan Ordo's victory celebrations continued late into the night. 6 members of the clan, 4 men and 2 women, had died in the battle, a quarter of the casualties they had inflicted on clan gentry. Veela had ordered all 30 bodies to be gathered together into a massive funeral pyre. Revan understood this mixing of friend and foe. They were all Mandalorians who had died in battle. By custom, they were all to a warrior's funeral, regardless of which clan they had been fighting for. The pyre burned for hours, the flames lighting the night and warming the camp as the brothers and sisters of the fallen recounted tales of their bravery. They honored their memories through song and feast, simultaneously grieving their deaths and celebrating the resounding Ordo victory. The ale flowed freely, but Revan had limited himself to a single mug. Because he had fought with Clan Ordo, he was entitled to join the revelry, but though he knew their customs, he wasn't Mandalorian. It was difficult for him to rejoice in the loss of comrades, no matter how honorable their deaths may have been. Revan was also wary of what Veela might do now that she knew he was a Jedi. Hopefully she just thought he was an anonymous rogue master. If she knew who he really was, there could be trouble. Many Mandalorians despised the Jedi, and Revan in particular. Revan had been responsible for countless Mandalorian deaths, and he had stolen and hidden Mandalore's mask, an act considered a war crime. Considering Veela's fierce pride in her people and her culture, she probably wouldn't simply forgive and forget. Fortunately, it seemed like she wasn't aware of his true identity. Over the course of the evening, Edric and several others came over to speak with him, making a point to include him in the clan festivities. Everyone seemed to know he had drawn the fire of the enemy basilisks, allowing the pilots to reach their mounts. Interestingly, though, none of them knew any of the details of what had occurred out beyond the edges of the main battle. Obviously, Veela had sworn the other pilots to secrecy. He should have taken that as a good sign, but he kept catching glimpses of Veela and the other pilots watching him suspiciously. They might not know he was Revan, but they knew he was a Jedi, and that clearly bothered them. He wasn't sure if Veela had ordered them to stay silent out of respect for what he had done during the battle, or because she thought they still needed him to find Mandalore's mask, or even because of her feelings for Canderous. But whatever the explanation, his secret seemed safe. For now. When he finally climbed to bed late that night, he was surprised to hear Canderous come stumbling into the tent a few minutes later.
I thought you would be with Veela. She's not too happy with me right now.
Canderous explained.
I will let her cool down for the night. Sorry about that. You did what you had to do.
His friend answered as he settled into his sleeping bag.
Sooner or later it was going to come out anyway. How bad is this? Veela doesn't like Jedi.
Canderous admitted.
But she's hard to read. Hopefully she will just hold a grudge for a few days.
The big man rolled over onto his side.
Either that, or she will try to kill us on tomorrow's climb.
Revan couldn't tell if he was joking. The weather in the morning was the same as every other morning on record. Freezing cold, with fierce winds and swirling snow that limited visibility. Revan had been hoping for a calm, clear day so they could use the basilisks to fly them up to the top. But even here at the base, unexpected gusts had enough strength to almost knock him off his feet. Higher up, the wind shear and lack of visibility would make an attempt at landing on the summit suicidal, even with most skilled pilots. Dangerous as it was, climbing to the top was the only real option.
Bad conditions for an ascent,
Canderous remarked as they stood at the base of the first spear.
This is as good as it gets,
Veela said.
If you're scared, I will get Edric to take your place and you can watch over the camp.
The old man would probably have a heart attack halfway up.
Canderous answered with a grin.
He's only a year older than you,
Veela pointed out.
I am like fine wine,
He replied.
I get better with age.
The playful exchange eased some of Revan's concerns about the mission, though he still wasn't thrilled by the makeup of the climbing team. There were 8 of them in total. Revan, Canderous, Veela, and the 5 other Basilisks, including Grizza, the young man who'd given up his mount to Canderous. These picks made a certain amount of sense. Going after Mandalore's mask was a great honor, and the Basilisk riders were among the most respected warriors in the clan. The only other person who might have been included was Edric, but he had been chosen to stay behind to lead Clan Ordo in case Veela and the others never came back. Yet Revan could not help noticing that all of the climbers chosen knew he was a Jedi, and Edric, Canderous' oldest and most loyal friend, was being left behind. He wished he'd had a chance to talk to Canderous before they had left. Now all he could do was keep his guard up throughout the ascent, just in case. They broke into 2 teams of 4, the members of each team connected by a long length of climbing rope. Canderous, Revan, and 2 of the pilots made up the first group. Veela and the other 3 pilots the second. In addition to their winter clothing and gear, each climber had a 20-kilo pack of supplies and rations strapped across his or her shoulders. The teams began their ascent simultaneously, moving along paths up the sheer verticals of the wall of ice that made up the spear's face. Each meter of progress was earned only by hacking into the ice, chipping away with a sharp-ended pick to create a small hold for a hand or foot, then hammering a brace pulley into the wall to secure the climbing rope. The pattern was repeated again and again. Progress was slow and exhausting. A cinder could send a climber plunging to a quick and gruesome death. Theoretically, the ropes and pulleys connecting each team should allow the 3 members to bear the weight if one should fall, but none of them was inclined to test the theory. After only 50 meters, the roaring wind was already strong enough to rip away their voices, forcing them to communicate with simple hand gestures. Despite the cold, Revan was sweating heavily beneath his layers of clothing, his body warmed by the steady physical exertion as they battled their way meter by painful meter toward the top. At least he was safe from Veela for the time being. The difficult climb required total focus and concentration from every climber as they worked in concert to reach the peak. Even if the Ordo pilots were plotting against him, they simply wouldn't be able to try anything until they reached the plateau at the top. At the start of the climb, the summit was invisible, lost in the swirl of snow and clouds. But by the 5th hour they had risen above the worst of the storm, giving them their first glimpse of the spear's peak, illuminated by Rakir's pale-orange sun. They were well over halfway to their goal, but exhaustion and fatigue were beginning to impede their progress. As the altitude increased, the air became thinner, leaving all the climbers panting and gasping. The pack strapped to Revan's back seemed to have doubled in weight, and he could feel the straps digging into his shoulders even through his clothes. But there was little to do except ignore the pain and concentrate on the climb. Veela's team was about 50 meters ahead. Suddenly one of the riders lost his footing and slipped. He dropped 10 meters before the ropes abruptly stopped his fall, leaving him dangling helplessly at the end of the line. The abrupt stop had jerked his backpack partially around, twisting the shoulder strap so that his arms were partially pinned behind his back. Combined with the howling winds buffeting him back and forth, he was unable to reestablish a grip on the mountain. Veela and the others began the slow and careful process of climbing back down to help him. It took about 2 minutes for Revan's team to draw level with Veela and her crew as they backtracked to rescue the wayward climber. Realizing the situation was under control, Revan's team pressed on toward the top. 5 minutes after the fall, Revan glanced back down to see that all 4 of Veela's team were once again safely in position. They were not trying to regain the lead, but moved more slowly and cautiously than before. 2 hours later, Revan's team reached the top. Canderous was first. Planting his feet firmly, he reached down to grab Revan's arm and haul him up. Revan did the same for the woman trailing behind him, and she did the same for the man behind her. The top of the first spear was a featureless plateau of slick ice covered by a thin dusting of snow. Looking across the gap between the 2 spears, Revan could see that the other summit was as bare and featureless as this one.
Now what?
Canderous shouted over the roar of the wind.
If this is the right peak, there should be an entrance around here somewhere.
Revan yelled back. A gust of wind shoved him sideways, and he almost stumbled.
An entrance to what?
Revan only shrugged. His vision hadn't shown him what he and Malik had discovered, and no more memories had bubbled to the surface during the climb. They all set their backpacks on the ground and started a grid-pattern search over the plateau's surface. It didn't take them long to find what they were looking for. Near the center of the plateau, under a dusting of snow, was a small durasteel hatch. Revan grabbed the handle and pulled hard, calling on the force to give him strength. when he felt his muscles beginning to strain. Slowly, reluctantly, the heavy cover swung open to reveal a ladder leading down into darkness.
You stay here and wait for Veela.
Canderous ordered the other 2 Mandalorians.
We will go down and check it out.
He retrieved several glow sticks from his backpack on the ground, along with a blaster pistol. Revan didn't have a weapon in his pack. Everyone the clan already knew he was a Jedi, and he was confident the lightsaber at his belt would be enough to deal with anything they ran into. Not that he expected any trouble. It was hard to imagine a more remote, isolated, and inhospitable location. It was easy to see why he had decided to hide Mandalore's mask here. But where was here exactly? Why was there a secret underground chamber built into the spear? And how had he and Malak found it in the first place? Canderous walked over to the hatch and dropped one of the glow sticks into it. It tumbled down, illuminating the length of the shaft as it fell. It stopped some 30 meters below, bouncing, rolling, and then settling on the ground.
After you,
Canderous said. As Revan began the long descent, his mind started to spin. Brief flashes of dormant memories exploded into his consciousness, only to vanish before he could fully grasp them. He had an overwhelming sense of déjà vu. He knew with certainty he and Malak had explored the dark chamber beneath the eyes, just as he and Canderous were exploring it now. The sights and sounds of his previous visit blended with his current surroundings, the images overlapping one another, obscuring his vision and making him dizzy. It got so bad that Revan had to close his eyes, clinging to the rungs of the ladder with a tense grip.
You okay?
Canderous asked from a few meters above. His voice echoed loudly off the rough-hewn rock walls.
My past is catching up with me.
Revan explained, shaking his head to dispel the vertigo. He waited a few more seconds, and when he opened his eyes again, everything had returned to normal. Taking a deep breath, he continued downward until he reached the bottom. The shaft ended in a tight, twisting tunnel that continued horizontally. Resisting the urge to draw his lightsaber, Revan pulled out another glow stick and started down the passage. Canderous followed close behind. The tunnel was narrow, forcing them to walk single file, but the ceiling was high enough that even Canderous didn't have to duck. It didn't take long for Revan to realize that they were walking on a slight decline, going ever deeper into the heart of the spear. The air around them grew warmer, causing them to unbutton their jackets and lower their hoods. As they continued on, Revan began to feel the unmistakable presence of the dark side. His hand dropped to the lightsaber at his belt. As he relaxed, he realized that the sensation was too faint to signify an immediate threat. Once the Force had been strong in this place, over time, many decades or even centuries, it had faded away to little more than a memory. Eventually the passage brought them into a large circular chamber hewn from the rock, easily 30 meters across. The chamber was empty save for a large stone crypt in the center.
What is this place?
Canderous whispered.
I think it's the burial chamber of an ancient Sith Lord.
Revan answered.
Like the tombs on Korriban.
Why would they bury him here in this frozen wasteland?
To his own surprise, Revan knew the answer to that question.
He was in exile. He fled here with a handful of his fanatically loyal followers many centuries ago. When he died, they carved out this secret chamber to interr him so his enemies couldn't find and desecrate his remains.
How do you know that?
Revan shrugged.
I just know. Malak and I came here looking for this crypt. Someone must have told us about it.
You mean someone like Mandalore?